Okay, so yours is a familiar face. Hank, why don't you start out by introducing yourself?
Sure. Well, my name's Hank Idsinga. I've been with the Toronto Police Service for coming up on 33 years now, and I am the inspector who's in charge of the homicide and now homicide missing persons unit at the Toronto Police Service. So I worked in homicide since 2005. Came here as a detective. Was promoted to detective sergeant in 2011 and then promoted to inspector in 2018, 2019.
So, I mean, your role in the homicide squad, both as an investigator and now as the unit commander, that's how I think most of the public knows you. But incredibly, people don't just start at Toronto Police Service in the homicide squad. So just tell us for a minute about your journey to where you are right now. Where did you start out? Where have you worked in Toronto?
Yeah, well, even before I started with the police service, I had a desire to work in some sort of homicide investigative work. And then I was lucky enough to be hired by the Toronto Police Service in 1989. And everyone starts out the same. You start out as a fourth class constable and you're assigned to a division, and you'll spend your first years as a police officer working in uniform in the scout cars of that division. And I still wasn't quite sure at that point in time which way to take my career path. And in 1991, I attended my first homicide scene as a uniform constable. And it was at Lansdowne in College. And I was simply posted as scene security at the front door. And when the homicide investigators showed up, I was so impressed with the way the occurrence was handled by the detective sergeant who was in charge. That's when I got that clear thought in my head. That's what I want to do right there. So always leaned more towards the investigative side of police work. And so I spent about 10 years at 14 Division, ended up in the major crime unit there, and did very well with some major investigations at 14 Division. So I was promoted and went over to 51 Division and spent about 5 years there. And the last 2 years of that were in the Criminal Investigative Bureau at 51 Division. And then one day there was a incident in 51 Division that overlapped with the homicide investigation. So I was dealing with Detective Sergeant Ken Taylor back in 2004 about that. And he said to me, "Hey, you know what, you're all right. Do you ever think about coming and working in homicide?" I said, "Yeah, that's exactly what I want to do." So he ended up endorsing me for that, and I came to homicide in 2005, in February of 2005.
Interesting. And it's interesting to hear you mention Ken Taylor's name. For anybody who's not familiar with him, I believe he used to be the former police chief Mark Saunders' partner in homicide for at least a period of time, right? And he's now heading up the fugitive / rope squad. So, and I'm trying to convince him to be a part of this too. So people may be hearing from Ken Taylor as well. Okay, so Inspector Idsinga, Hank, I recall having a conversation with you years ago. Like it must be going on a decade now, where we were just chatting and you started telling me about your love of cycling. And many members of the public may already be familiar with this. It's been talked about, you've got a stationary bike in your office. You're often out on the road as soon as the drier, warmer weather comes. But what I found really interesting was the group of people that you cycle with. So tell me about your cycling club and how you got hooked up with these people.
Sure. Well, I've enjoyed riding my bike my entire life. And I'm going to say around 2011, I really kind of put all other forms of exercise and well-being aside, and really started focusing on riding the bike. And at the time I had a hybrid bike, and I had set a certain weight loss goal at the time. And I said, when I hit this weight, I'm going to splurge and buy myself a road bike, a proper road bike. And so in 2012, I bought my first road bike and was just riding by myself. And in 2013, one of the detectives on the team I was on in Homicide was a pretty serious road cyclist, and he kind of took me under his wing as far as organized road cycling goes. And it took me a little while of keeping at it and trying to get a little bit better at it. And eventually he brought me up to an area in Toronto here, where this group of fellows who were part of a cycling team called Les Domestiques would ride every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning at 6 a.m. for about 30 kilometers for just a good 1 hour workout. And so I started riding with them back in 2013. And then I was actually invited to formally join the club in 2016. And so I've been a member of that club now. Well, honestly, on and off. I had to leave for some personal reasons over the course of a couple of years, but I'm right back at it last year and this year. And Les Domestiques is a cycling club. It's not a racing club. No one's well, I shouldn't say no one's that serious. Everyone's pretty serious about their cycling. And the club is originated in Mississauga and has probably about 100 members now. That stretch from Collingwood to Mississauga, Oakville, Toronto. And we just run organized cycling events and raise an awful lot of money for different charities by participating in these events. So I'm very fortunate to be part of the club, and I'm not the greatest cyclist by any stretch. I'm not built for cycling. Right?
Oh, come on. You've been doing it for so long. Come on.
Yeah. But I'll never get over the fact that I'm 6.5 feet tall and come in at 230 pounds on a good day. Right? So Hills and I don't agree.
So is that the hills? Is that where you like fall to the back of the pack? Yeah. But then you like get up, nice to the front once you hit flat road. Is that how it goes?
I like to stay as close to the front as I can on flat roads, but I'll never be the fastest cyclist. There's always going to be a lot of people faster than me. So, but that's the beauty of cycling. If you ever feel a need to learn about teamwork, a lot of people don't appreciate how cycling really is a team sport, and you rely heavily on each other, and to cycle in a peloton or in a group. And I think that's the real beauty of it. So you have the social aspect of it. You're doing some great work within the community, raising a lot of money, like I said, for charities, and really doing a huge benefit for yourself, both physically and mentally, by having that outlet of cycling. So I've participated in some charity rides with the group over the last couple of years, and this year I'm trying to increase that and participate in a few more rides. So I was lucky enough last week to participate in the ride for brain health, which benefits the Baycrest Foundation, and where they shut down the Gardiner and the Don Valley Parkway. And we cycle from the exhibition grounds up to York Mills and then back down again. And then this past weekend, we participated in the Ride to Conquer Cancer. And that originates, of course, in Toronto. And day one is Toronto to Hamilton. And then day two is supposed to be Hamilton to Niagara Falls, but we got a little too much rain, so we just rode back to Toronto on day two. But still, the team set out with a goal of breaking the previous fundraising record for a team, which was, I believe, $1.1 million. So the original goal was 1.2 for the team, and we ended up with over $2.7 million.
Wow.
One of the team members, his wife, is currently just finished going through treatment for cancer. So that was a really big motivator for the team to all get together and really do their hardest to raise a lot of funds. So that's why we were successful. And again, it speaks to the power of teamwork and the power of really involving a lot of different people from different parts of the community to come together and put that together.
I think that's incredible, and congratulations to you and Les Domestiques, all of the members. There's a couple things I wanted to ask you about, but first, I know also, like you mentioned, the brain health ride. That's an issue that's a cause that is close to your heart also. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, the Baycrest Foundation really does a lot of work in different areas, but focusing on dementia and Alzheimer's and battling that. So they raise a lot of money through different events through the year and support a lot of agencies that provide at-home care, different programs to help those with dementia and Alzheimer's. And my own mother really passed away in 2016 from complications of Alzheimer's. So she had been suffering. She was 82 years old when she passed away, but she had been suffering from Alzheimer's for 7 or 8 years leading up to that. And she was living in a assisted living residence. And we believe she essentially fell out of her bed one night. And of course, the caretakers came along and lifted her back up and put her in her bed, not realizing that she had struck her head and had a brain bleed. And it wasn't until several days later, and of course, having Alzheimer's, she wasn't able to communicate that, boy, my head hurts. And a couple of days later, the caregivers noticed she was exhibiting signs of a stroke and got her to the hospital. And she passed away a couple of days later. So very motivating for me to participate in that ride, and glad I could contribute a little bit to helping the fundraising for the Baycrest Foundation, and they do some phenomenal work. So
you so when you're going through all this with your mom, I mean, I've talked to so many people over the years who have gone through similar journeys, unfortunately, with Alzheimer's, dementia. We're familiar with that in our own family. It's not an easy thing. But you were in the homicide squad at that time, and you were already like a pretty high profile officer. So I just bring this up because I want people to understand that you see people on TV, you see these gruff cops, investigators, and they all have lives too. My heart goes out to you that you were going through that when, you also had like a very high profile, demanding job. And I imagine it wouldn't have been easy, just as it wouldn't have been for anybody in any job. So thank you for sharing that with us. You told me also about a ride that you did in support of St. Joe's Hospital, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And you had said that was one that was close to your heart too. And I assumed it was because like, maybe there was a baby born there or whatever, but that actually wasn't what it was. So tell me about that ride and tell me what it meant to you.
No, yeah, that was back in the fall, and it was the ride for St. Joe's. And again, it was with Les Domestiques, and it was out of the Velodrome in Milton. Supposed to be a 100-kilometer ride. I think I came in at 99.5 kilometers or something like that. And someone said to me, "You can go around the parking lot once more." I'm not that anal, right? It's close enough. But the interesting thing about that is, like I said, I spent the first 10 years of my career in 14 Division. And St. Joe's Hospital is just over the border into 11 Division. And so I spent many, many nights in the emergency ward at St. Joe's with different victims. They also had a detox center there, so we brought a lot of clients into the detox center. And at one point in time, I was injured while working, and I ended up in St. Joe's, and I had some stitches on the back of my head
Oh,
that were put in at St. Joe's. So
do you still have a scar?
it's barely noticeable. It was quite noticeable for a lot of years,
But that's why you keep your head shaved, right? It's like the tough guy look. You're hoping people can
show
see
off the scar.
Yeah.
So, and I'm just trying to think of what year that was. That would have been about 1996.
Wow. Can you tell us what happened?
Sure. We were working night shift in 14 Division. I was in uniform, and there was a police officer who was part of the foot patrol or the community response unit in 14 Division, and he was on his way home from shift at about 2 o'clock in the morning, and he actually saw a guy down by King and Dufferin, and knew that this guy was wanted for a series of armed robberies. And he saw him go into a house, but we didn't have cellular phones or anything back there. So this officer actually stood there in front of the house, well, a little bit of a distance away, and just kept an eye on the front door. And then the first police car that he saw, which actually was us, and it was a couple of hours later, around 4 o'clock in the morning.
A couple hours later?
Yeah, he stood out there for a couple of hours, just waiting.
There wasn't a payphone. Like this is the 90s. There wasn't anything around.
There was nothing, and of course he couldn't lose sight of the front of that address.
Yeah.
Because if you turned around and went to a payphone, then you'd lose your grounds to be able to go into that address to be able to get this guy, because you have to have that constant observation. So really just a fantastic job by him. And he flagged us over and let us know what was happening. And I called I was in uniform, but I called the major crime units at 14 Division, and thankfully they were still working. So they all came out in plain clothes, and we had this house surrounded, and then the guy came out and he saw us, and he ended up going back in and popping out a third floor window and started running across the rooftops. And so we started chasing after him, and I ended up climbing up a tree.
Okay, wait. Okay. Okay, so this guy is running across rooftops. He's like Spider-Man, basically, but he's like not using his powers for good. And you guys are running along the ground watching him.
Exactly.
And then you see a tree and you decide to climb up. Like, what kind of tree is this? Is there branches all over, like for you to put your feet on, or?
Yeah. No, it was a good sized tree. And
had you ever climbed a tree before? Did they teach you this in the police college?
Not since I was a kid.
Okay.
But I figured, okay, if I get up this tree, I've got access to the second floor balcony at this house that he's running across the roof of. So I went up the tree, and I went to jump to go from the tree to the balcony, and the railing of the balcony gave way, and I ended up falling. And thankfully I've got a good thick head, but I hit the ground. And in the meantime, the major crime guys were going in the front door and the back door of this place. And they ended up getting the guy up on the third floor. And at the time, we were wearing the light blue police uniform shirts. So I walked around to the front of the house, and one of the guys
was get up after that.
Yeah, I got up.
How far had you fallen? Was it basically like from the second floor, or like how far would you say?
From the second floor down to the ground floor.
Yeah.
So say 12 feet, maybe 10, 12 feet. And came around the front, and one of the guys was looking at me kind of weird. And so I looked down to see what he was looking at, and my shirt was all purple. I'm like, what's going on there? Right. And then realized I had this big flap of skin hanging from the back of my head. And so, yeah. And I was taken to St. Joe's, and that was my personal encounter with St. Joe's Hospital. Getting,
Jeez.
I think, about 12 stitches in the back of my head, and I think I made a full recovery. Some might say I never did. But, yeah,
I think you've done pretty well for yourself. Even if you had like a brain injury, I would say that your brain still is working at very good capacity. So, oh my
thank you.
gosh, that's interesting. Okay, so Inspector Hank Idsinga, when you see him walking around with his shaved head, it's not because he's losing his hair, it's because he wants you to see this big scar and get the story out of him. Wow, incredible. Okay, so so you've talked to me about your rides for St. Joe's, cancer, brain health. The Joe's though thing, I do want to ask you a little bit more about that, because when you think about like the people that you would see in there, and when we spoke on the phone before this interview, you hadn't mentioned your own injury there. But I was wanting to know about, some of the stories that you think about at St. Joe's and just 14 Division in general, because to work there as a frontline patrol officer, and then I know you've investigated homicides there as well. As you know, there's a very vulnerable population that lives in Parkdale, in 14 Division area. But what sort of stories come to your mind when you think about your 10 years working in 14 Division?
Wow. Probably too many to count.
Hmm.
I still regularly drive through 14 Division, and even with my wife and my daughter, driving through 14 Division, I say, I remember when this happened here, or when that happened there. I mean, that first homicide scene at Lansdowne College, I always tell the story about that whenever we drive past.
Hmm.
Right? Because at the time I was a fourth class constable, and my coach officer and myself were sitting in what was then a 7-Eleven lot on the southeast corner. And a fellow from my police recruit class who worked in a division north of us in 53 Division was just driving down Lansdowne on his way to the stores unit to pick up a new pair of boots. And somebody came out of this house. It turned out to be a motorcycle gang member who had just found his buddy up on the third floor who had been decapitated with an axe. And so he flagged this poor officer down, not his division, and just kind of passing through, and pointed out the murder to him. And then we got the radio call, and like I said, we were right around the corner, and ended up on the post there. So, and the homicide guys came along and ultimately solved that murder. So that definitely sticks in my head. A lot of the people that I met, members of the community in 14 Division, playing basketball down at Cam H every Sunday night with a Barbados Athletic Club down in the gym there. There's still a lot of good friends and memories from there. Really, every part of 14 Division and the boundaries have changed a little bit now. A lot of Parkdale was absorbed by the new 11 Division. And murder-wise, I would say probably the Caitlin Sampson case, which when it happened in 2008 was in 14 Division. That certainly sticks out in my mind. But working there, and especially going back to my first 10 years, and primarily working there in uniform, I could probably literally drive down every street in that division and tell you a story. So it was busy back in the day. It was a great place to work and to learn. You had Little Italy, you had Little Portugal, you had Chinatown, you had Parkdale. Bloor and Lansdowne was notorious for a lot of drug activity back in the day. The Annex, the Brunswick House, the beginnings of the entertainment district in the South End. The old factory area that used to be Inglis, right? Back in the day were just a bunch of old abandoned factories, and now it's Liberty Village,
Mm-hmm.
right? More homicide scenes than I could probably even remember as a uniform officer guarding scenes. Alexandra Park, of course, is in 14 Division.
Mm-hmm.
The first few years of my career, that was Zone 4 in 14 Division, patrol area 1414. And
Mm-hmm.
that was where I was usually posted down in that area. So, yeah, like I said, literally every street in that division. Kensington Market
Mm-hmm.
uh, was also in the division, which was a relatively quiet place back in those days.
Hmm.
It's turned definitely into a more publicly accessible area now. I think a great little area for the city of Toronto and for people to go and see. The Canadian National Exhibition, of course, I worked they used to send officers down there for 3 weeks over the summer, and your post was the Canadian National Exhibition. And unfortunately, the year I was posted there, I was partnered up with another young officer from 12th Division named Todd Bayless,
Hmm.
and he was killed the following year, the following summer. So that was hard. Um,
I
and
didn't
I was
realize that you were his partner. I'm so sorry to
yeah,
hear that.
yeah, just for 3 weeks, right? We worked together on that detail. We had a team of 4 guys on our platoon, and Mark Beausoleil and Billy McConnell and Todd Bayless and myself, and just walked around the CNE, taking care of things for a few weeks that summer. And like I said, it was the following summer when he was killed. So,
Mm.
um, and after he was killed, I remember being, 12th Division didn't have any officers to patrol 12th Division. So they took officers from neighboring divisions to cover for about 48, 72 hours afterwards. And so I
Mm-hmm.
ended up going in 12th Division for a day. Yeah, there's a million stories to her.
So
And I'm sure.
you mentioned, telling stories to your wife and daughter as you drive through 14 Division. I wonder, your daughter's, how old's your daughter now?
She turns 20 this summer.
What? Okay, I remember you telling me about your daughter when she was a little girl, 20 this summer. So how does she react now if she's in the car with you going through 14 Division and you bring up that homicide scene again at Lansdowne? Is she fascinated by your work? Is she rolling your eye and say, Dad, yeah, we know already? How does she react to these stories?
Probably a little bit of both. You get some rolling of the eyes, or sometimes you telling the story, you turn around, she's got her headphones in, not even listening. Right? Pretty typical, I think. So I don't know what she'll end up doing. She's talked about policing,
Mm.
but she's in university right now, and we'll see where she ends up in a couple of years. So
What would you think of your daughter becoming a police officer?
I don't think any father would would be too supportive of that. But if that's what she wants to do, then that's definitely what she should do. So
You're referring to like just worrying about her safety, that sort of thing?
yeah, the safety, the shift work, the mental tolls, the physical tolls. It's not an easy job.
Mm-hmm.
It never has been an easy job, and especially if you do it properly. It's a lot of work, and so much stuff goes on in the background. And I've always tried to be um, proactively transparent with the work that we do, and share as much as I'm able to share. And it's hard to get an appreciation for what goes on. And if you look at our recent story about this little girl who was found in the dumpster
Mm-hmm.
up on Dale Avenue, and 3 or 4 weeks after that original call, I'm able to give some more information about what's going on and some of the people involved and some of the agencies involved and the investigative steps that were taken. And yet it doesn't even scratch the surface of the amount of work that's going on in the background.
Mm.
Right. There's a lot of people doing a lot of great work in the police service. And, you know, I know your focus is a little bit on, you know, the other side of officers' lives, but the amount of work that they actually do at their job is also very, very impressive.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you can't always separate the two, right? Especially in an office like yours. You can't have your police life and your family life completely separate. You're on call. You never know when you're going to get called, or, you know, you can be gone for 24, 48, 72, maybe more hours at a time. Right. So they're sort of inescapable from each other. So how have you found, you mentioned the mental toll. We know that you're really into cycling. You said that helps with your mental health, but have you found things that work for you throughout your career in terms of separating it to the extent that you can, or, you know, working through all the stuff that you're exposed to?
Well, I think the one thing I've always tried to do is have some sort of physical outlet. You know, right now it's cycling. When I was first starting out, I was quite obsessive with playing basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to do that till my mid-30s. And then when my knees couldn't take much more of that, I switched a little bit more to being a gym rat. And then when I was really kind of grew weary of that, and I focused on the cycling. So I think it's so important to not let yourself go and buy into that unhealthy lifestyle. It's already unhealthy enough to be working the shift work and to be on call and to be working all hours of the night. But if you compound that with living an unhealthy lifestyle, and the police service has gotten so much better with addressing that, with having a wellness unit and coaches available, and things such as yoga programs and meditation programs and mental health achievement standards, and a lot of support around that. But I really think physical fitness is a big part of that. So
have you done yoga? Have you done the meditation stuff?
I'm not too flexible. I've tried a couple yoga things.
Yes, yoga will get you there.
Yeah. The meditation, it's interesting because a lot of these guys I cycle with do yoga and meditation, and a lot of them are very high achievers. And
it's the Bay Street crowd. A lot of the people you cycle with they're Bay Street, they're bankers, they're like high achievers, as you say. I don't think we mentioned that.
Yeah. And of course, all the fitness activities are tracked online through various apps. And I can see, okay, well, they're meditating or they're doing yoga, you know, at night or before the bike rides. So we had a girl here in the office who talked to me about meditation there a few months ago. And she said, well, you know, you really should try it. I make it a rule of thumb every morning, once in the afternoon, and again before I go to bed, to do a little bit of meditation. And so I'm not completely against the idea, but the evening meditation is tough, because to sit there for 10 minutes with your eyes closed and taking deep breaths, and I tend to go fall asleep. So that's still a work in progress.
You sound like my husband, except like it doesn't take meditating. It just takes turning on like the latest Netflix show that I don't want him to sleep through, and he's like passed out next to me. Yeah.
No, there's no TV in our bedroom. I can tell you that.
Oh, same. But it makes it harder sometimes, because then we get settled in on the couch and my husband's sleeping and I'm like, hey, go into bed. And he doesn't want to get up and I don't want to get up. And sometimes it's harder not having a TV in the bedroom because you just wish that you were there.
Yeah.
Do you think it's the shift work? Like, do you think doing the shift work trained you to be able to fall asleep like very easily? Are you the kind of guy that can just like go have a nap for 15 minutes if you want to? Have you trained your body to do that?
I think the shift work might have helped, when I was on the floor here in Homicide, and I'd come home after working, 36, 48 hours straight, and on the most vicious murder you can think of. And I'd crawl into bed and I'd be gone like that. And my wife was like, I don't know how you can do that. Like, I'd have so many things rolling around in my head. And I'll be the type of guy who will crawl into bed and then wake up 2 or 3 hours later and suddenly be like, oh, okay, now I'm thinking about it. Right?
And then you can't get back to sleep?
Yeah, so I'll just get up and go back to work. So the nights of sleep that are good are definitely the nights of sleep when you're not worried about or thinking about something at work, right? So I've been primarily on days for the last 4 years, but I do get up at 4:15 in the morning.
4:15? I knew you got up early, but that's like still nighttime for most people.
Yeah, 4:15, I like to get caught up on my emails and messages. So then I come into work and my bike is at work, as you noted, and either ride my bike here in the office where my trainer is set up, or in the good weather going outside, and I meet the guys at 6 o'clock in the morning. And it's about a 10-minute ride from police headquarters up to our starting point. Before I do
Okay,
that.
wait. So you just said up to our starting point. So you're getting the hill out of the way before you meet up with your team members, or are you guys still climbing? Because I know you can head up Yonge Street, like that's a big hill. Do you guys go down? Is that strategic on your part that you start below and you end up, you get the hill out of the way before you get together?
No, the hill I have to climb is, if you think of Bay Street, or from College up to Bloor, is essentially uphill, but I wouldn't call it a hill. It's about a 0.5% climb.
Okay, we're not. I was thinking up to, like, I used to actually live very close to police headquarters years ago. Lived at Yonge and Carleton, and I used to do a boot camp in the mornings, like 6 o'clock in the morning. And a friend of mine and I would ride our bikes up there, and this was at like Yonge and St. Clair. I don't remember if it was Yonge and St. Clair or Yonge and Eglinton. But there is a hill there. Like, that is how we measured our success. Because when we started doing, like, we were getting off our bike and walking it up the hill. Like, there was just that stretch. And then one day it happened, and we would see these other cyclists passing us by. And maybe it was Les Domestiques, maybe it was you guys. But when we could finally just keep on cycling, we're like, okay, this fitness thing it's working. But okay, Carleton to Bloor, College to Bloor, not as big of a steep of a climb as right up there.
No, it's like 0.5%, if that. But I do remember guys working in the foot patrol and on the bikes in 52 and 51 division being exhausted at the end of their shift and saying to me, you don't realize it's all uphill from the lake up to the northern boundary of the division. So if you're riding your bike up and down there for 6, 8 hours every day, that can be tiring. But we go up north of Davenport, essentially, is where we meet and start. But we'll purposely do the hill on Bayview, right? Do the hill on Mount Pleasant. Those are the climbs for us in the morning. So, but and in the grand scheme of things, it's not a heck of a lot of elevation. I mean, the Bayview Hill, I think most people, if they're not cyclists, will look at it and say, I couldn't ride up that thing. But the good guys in our group can do it in about 2.5 minutes. My record is about 3.5 minutes. Usually 4 minutes would be acceptable for me. So they're not huge climbs by any stretch.
I want to ask you, first, I want to get back to your cycling club in a second, but I want to ask you, because you mentioned near the beginning of this conversation that you always wanted to be a homicide investigator or in an investigative role. I wonder if, when you actually started on the ground in uniform as a police officer, constable, was there anything about policing that surprised you that you didn't realize? Like, I know you always had your eyes on that investigative role, but was there anything about the role that surprised you that you didn't realize police officers did or experienced or witnessed?
you're really stretching my memory banks back 33 years.
I'm testing that concussion you got. I want to see if your brain is at full capacity.
Um, I think, the one thing that I've always thought about is, and of course, reflecting back on 33 years, you tend to remember the interesting or the fun things. You don't recall the more boring or mundane things that you spent days and days spending your time at. But I think the one thing I've discussed it before is we get called for absolutely everything, right? You just never know when that call is going to go over the radio or what that call is going to be. There's definitely some bizarre moments that stick out in my mind, right? But just the fact that we can get called for absolutely anything under the sun and have to respond and do respond. There's a lot of criticism around the police for, I'll give you a good example for how we deal with mental health calls. And that's forever evolving. But I remember when, 1001 Queen Street was still open and had secure wards and whatnot. When the doctors couldn't control a patient, who would they call? Right? They would call us. And I'll always remember this one fellow, Ivan Bear was his name. And he was a patient in a secure ward there. And one of the jobs I did for 6 months was working in the warrant office in 14 Division. And one of the jobs in the warrant office was you had to transport these guys occasionally from 1001 Queen Street up to Penetanguishene, to the mental health jail up there. And so I ended up transporting this guy, Ivan, a couple of times, and actually got along great with him. We'd let him smoke in the back of the car and just crack the window open a little bit and had some good laughs and whatnot back and forth to Penetanguishene. And then one day at 1001 Queen Street, we got a 911 call for a patient that the doctors can't control. I ended up responding. I was the only car available. I was by myself. And I walked into the ward and they've got this room barricaded at the end of the hallway. And the doctors are standing there and the security guards are standing there and they've got their tonfa sticks out at the time. And I walk up and it's Ivan. And it's just like, Ivan, how you doing? Right? Oh, Hank, right? How you doing? And I said, guys, I got this, right? And I just went in and sat and chatted with him for a while and till he calmed down and was willing to have his restraints put back on. And it was good that I had that relationship with him beforehand, right? But that's just kind of an example of you never know what that call is going to be and where it's going to come from and the type of thing you're going to be dealing with. So going out there and needs our help, that's what we do.
Is there anything that you wish, I mean, there's got to be so many things on a daily basis that you think if the public only knew, if the public saw that we were doing this, but is there anything that you wish that the public understood about police officers that isn't really talked about as human beings, as police officers, as both?
Well, there's an old saying, right? The public are the police and the police are the public. And one element of that is that the police officers in the city are drawn from the public members of this society, right? So there are officers from all different walks of life with all sorts of different life experiences. You might have a 21-year-old rookie constable straight out of college into the police service. You might have someone who had a moment in their life at 50 years old where they thought, you know what, I'm done career number one. I always wanted to be a police officer. I'm going to go and become a police officer.
Sorry.
That's okay. And, you know, a good friend of mine just joined the police service 4 years ago now. He was 46 years old.
Wow.
Spent his life working in, this is his third career.
Wow.
I met him when he was in the bike industry. And, you know, he started getting a little tired of that. And I said, why don't you join the police service? Right.
Really?
Like, oh, never really thought about that, but let me get back to you on that. And a month later, he said, okay, yeah, I think I'd like to do that. So he's actually working 14 division right now.
Was he from the banking crowd, those guys that you were cycling with?
No, he was he started out in his younger days as an engineer. And started working in a bike shop, and then became a master mechanic with bikes, and then had his own shop. And where his shop was the building was being torn down for condos, so he had to move. And he thought, okay, well, what else can I do? There's another fellow that I met through the cycling community who was a fitness coach. And a hell of a cyclist, and got to know him. And same thing, he talked to me and he said, well, you know what, I always kind of thought I'd become a firefighter. I said, you ever thought about the police service? And so he ended up joining Toronto Police as well about 2 or 3 years ago now. And he called me up one day and he said, you never guess where I'm going to get posted? And I said, where? He says, 14 division. I said, that's great. I said, what platoon are you on? He says, B platoon. I said, that's my old platoon, 14 division B platoon. Wow. So that was kind of neat to see that happen as well.
Hank, you may have just found 2 new officers you can tell all your stories to, and they're not going to have their headphones in. They're not going to be rolling their eyes. You've got a new audience for all your 14 division stories. That's fantastic.
I love it when they call me now with stories.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And say, oh, you're not going to believe what happened. I'm like, I probably will believe it, but yeah, go ahead. And they get so excited and just tell me things, you know, what happened during their shift and whatnot. And I see them going through a lot of the things I went through when I first started, but of course I was much younger when I first started. So it's fun to watch. That's
I love that you get excited by their stories and their excitement. But you also say that, you know, you would be nervous if your own daughter became a police officer. Would you change anything? Like, would you still choose this career path if you could do it all over? Like you must carry your own, there must be negative impacts, but also positive impacts, because you've smiled as you've reflected on a lot of the stories that you've told me.
Yeah, you know what? I find it hard to imagine doing anything else. I dabbled a little bit in computer science through high school, and I thought, oh, maybe that's the direction I'll go in. And you know, I'm glad I ended up choosing this career, and have a lot of good memories to probably someday be that guy in the retirement home who will never shut up about the war stories from, you know, 30 plus years in policing. So.
God forbid you end up in a retirement home in 14 division. Oh boy.
God forbid I end up in a retirement home with a bunch of other police officers. And, right.
Well, in my day,
Yeah, trying to outdo each other with stories. So
I wanted to ask you one more question. You mentioned near the beginning of our conversation when we were talking about your cycling group, you began riding with them in 2013 and you were asked to be a member in 2016. Is that right?
Right.
What does it take to get into that club? Because 3 years cycling with them, like I imagine you being invited into like the stone. Do you remember Stonecutters from The Simpsons?
Yeah.
Yes. So was there a big ritual involved? Like how did you make the cut finally after 3 years? And was it something that you had aspired to?
Like I said, I'm not the greatest cyclist in the world by any stretch. It's a group of guys that really has evolved, and started out So you've got the cycling club Les Domestiques. And those are the guys who in 2013, I started riding with in Rosedale. But a lot of people from the community would see us out there every morning and they wanted to join in. And so it kind of grew. And it's almost like there's a second club now, the Rosedale Riders. And the vast majority of Rosedale riders are now also domestiques, right? But there's still that Rosedale riders group that is pretty open and welcoming to anyone who wants to come out at 6 o'clock in the morning, who knows somebody in the group that can introduce them and show them around. That's grown exponentially. And the domestiques is still that core group of cyclists. And essentially what has to happen is you kind of have to establish yourself with a couple of people from the group and be sponsored and then go through a vetting process. And if you survive all of that, then you pay your dues and you're welcome to the club. So
what is this vetting process?
I don't know if how much.
This is the Stonecutters Club, isn't it?
It's not quite like that. It's essentially, unless anyone has an objection to you joining the club, you'll join the club, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And yeah, it took me 3 years, but like I said, I was definitely a much worse cyclist in 2013 to 2016 than I am now. And like I said, I'll never be a great cyclist, but it's organized enough. Like for instance, during the Ride to Conquer Cancer, George Hincapie and Bobby Julick came up from South Carolina, and they're both Tour de France stage winners. And the opportunity to ride side by side with guys like that is just awesome. George Hincapie is essentially riding along as we're busting our butts to keep going at a decent speed, and he's drinking his coffee out of the paper cup as he's pedaling along. And yeah, it's amazing to see. Like I said, there's always going to be someone out there faster than you. So it really is a privilege to belong to that club, and they do a lot of great work for the community. And
I've got another nickname. I don't know if I had a nickname for you before, but I've got a new nickname for you. It's Humble Hank. I can't count how many times you talked about how you're not that good of a cyclist. I think it's incredible. I mean, who cares how fast you go? Who cares like how far behind you are when you're climbing up those hills? What you've been able to accomplish along with your team is remarkable. And I know I think you said in a previous conversation I had with you, that you guys used to do like one fundraising event a year. And now this year you've already done. How many have you done this year, and how many more do you have to do?
Well, I've done 3 this year. And how many more to do? I'll probably play that by ear, but probably another 2 or 3. And then we'll do rides, of course, that aren't fundraising rides. Just get the group together for a particular occasion and off we go, right? So I'll definitely still be putting a lot more mileage in on my bike. I do 30 kilometers every morning, right? I'm Monday to Friday, and then I'm lucky enough that my wife is a very good cyclist herself. And so on the weekends, we get out at least once or twice on the bikes and do that. And that's a great thing to have in common as well, right? Especially when you're looking at retirement and what you can do to occupy your time. And you can amalgamate it with some traveling.
If you ever want to feel better about your cycling, Hank, come to my house, because I've been a stationary cyclist for quite some time. I was a big fan of the spin class. I've got a bike in my basement. My husband and I just purchased bikes, and we're now a biking family.
Wow.
And we've got like I've got the hybrid bike. He's got more of like a mountain bike. We get whatever's on sale at Costco. Okay. So I don't have a road bike yet. If you come with us and we'll be pulling like two of our kids in the trailer behind us, our son's on his bike, you and your wife will feel quite spectacular about your riding skills. I can almost guarantee it.
Well, that's the beauty of road bikes. Like I said, back in 2011, when I was riding my hybrid bike and I'd be riding along Lakeshore thinking, I'm doing pretty good here. I'm sitting in at about 28 kilometers an hour. And then a 75-year-old guy will blow past me on his road bike like I'm standing still. And
Wow.
I got to get one of those, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Eventually, I plan on doing it eventually. But right now, as we're pulling we still got like two of our kids can still fit in those little trailers. While we're pulling those, I'm like, I'm not going to put all the money out to get, because those things are expensive. I'm not going to get the road bike yet, not when we're kind of going over this different terrain and everything. But one day I will get it. And who knows, maybe I'll hike up to up Mount Pleasant with you one day.
Oh, you should. One of the probably the highlight of the ride last week on the Gardner and the Don Valley was one of our club members took his 4 kids and his wife out, and little kids one of them was on a trail along behind this guy's bike. And just pedaling furiously, and then the other 3 kids were on their own bikes, and his wife as well, and that was just great to see. So, and the Ride to Conquer Cancer, you see the same thing. People, all walks of life, who are out on all different types of bikes and trying to finish that 100 kilometers and raise some money for a very good cause. And there's tons of events through the city at any given time. One of the things that I was very lucky to participate in a few years ago was the Ride for George, 46 for George.
What's that?
That was after George Floyd was killed.
Oh,
down in the States. Yeah. There was a fellow up here, Matthew Cuesta, who on his own volition, and he was a fairly new to cycling, said, I'm going to ride 46 kilometers a day for 46 days.
Wow.
For George Floyd. And it became quite a big thing here in the city. And he came out riding with us in Rosedale a couple of times during those 46 days and did his 46 kilometers there. And then on the final day, he opened it up to everyone to join him and did laps of Exhibition Place to get the 46 kilometers in. So we were very lucky to go and participate in that and support him for that. So that was definitely a highlight of my cycling career as well.
Amazing. And what a good point to end on. Humble Hank, Inspector Idsinga, it's been such a pleasure talking to you. I so appreciate you taking the time. You're probably one of the busiest guys in the police service, I'm sure. Anything else we didn't talk about that you wanted to add before we say goodbye?
No, it's been a pleasure, and thank you for doing this. And there's lots of good stories out there, and hopefully you find some of them and to be able to share. So.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Tamara.